Hey everyone, welcome back to Trek on the Tube. Yes, it is indeed time for another Star Trek review, but no, we're not talking about Star Trek Lower Decks. This time we're talking about Star Trek, the original series, Season 1, Episode 6, in the release order. As usual, we're doing thoughts and opinions first before moving into the Easter eggs and references section, which admittedly isn't as full as when we're talking Lower Decks, but we do have some comparisons between the original version and the remastered version to go over, so stick around until the end. Alright, Mud's Woman. Before we begin though, the way I do these reviews for the original series is by pretending that we are the audience in the 60s, discovering this show, this new universe, as it's delivered to us, as it comes out on TV. But I am going to open this review with a statement that is very much based on my views today. I remembered this episode as being horribly sexist and very cringe-inducing in that it portrayed essentially a sex trafficker in a comedic way. But that's false. As bizarre as it may sound, somehow over time my memories of this particular Harry Mudd appearance were warped and distorted. That's not to say the episode doesn't have problems, and we're gonna get into them, believe me. It's just that I was expecting something truly appalling and irredeemable, but that's not the case. Many of the issues that stood out in my mind, many of the negative memories I had actually have some sort of justification, or excuse, or on-screen explanation. It's interesting how time can affect one's perception of things. Anyway, let's do this. Mud's Woman. What do we think? Well, to put it kindly, it's a mediocre episode, as in subpar. Truly the first real misstep of this Star Trek show, in my opinion. Charlie X was the episode I liked the least until now, and even though I don't think back to it fondly, I will say it had quite a few redeeming qualities, and at the very least brought some intriguing world building to the universe in which the show is taking place. Mud's Woman doesn't do that. To be frank, Mud's Woman doesn't do much. There are some elements I did enjoy. The chase in the beginning, for example. The Enterprise is in pursuit of this seemingly disobedient rogue vessel, and it was fun to see how Captain Kirk and his crew handled that situation. I also will admit the episode does do a good job at keeping you intrigued about these three women that Harry Mudd brings along with him. Are they human? Are they alien? What's the deal with the way they affect the crew? But sadly, these positives aren't nearly enough to tip the scales in the episode's favor. I just don't know what they were thinking with this thing. I guess the concept of a space scoundrel does make sense, and it could be fun, but to have 50 minutes deal with the singular plot of him trying to not get arrested and sell his merchandise to any colony he can completely baffles me. I enjoy the idea, I guess, of the space criminal or space conman, but yeah, I mean, here, there just wasn't enough story to justify an entire episode. And so, ultimately, we get peculiar scenes, like the ones between one of the women and Captain Kirk, which serve no other purpose than padding to get the expected runtime. I know, I'm being mean. I know, I'm sorry. There were some specific moments that were really great, though. The Captain Kirk, Dr. McCoy back and forth on the bridge was hilarious. They're both trying to figure out what makes these passengers so attractive to them, so they run through what I assume are the usual theories in the future. Are they using some sort of special pheromone? Are they aliens? But neither of them has any of the answers, and so they just end up throwing the question back at each other. Eventually, the Doctor just rambles on about his own issues, and then both of them are completely lost.
I don't follow you. I don't either.
I loved that moment. It not only makes sense to see this kind of scene in the fact that it's a completely realistic depiction of how two humans would act, but it was also important for character development and interpersonal dynamics. I really do like their friendship. The sets were great too. The ship, yeah, of course, but we're used to that by now. What I mean is the planet's surface and the shack or the house, however you want to call it, the stone construction they have. I thought they were great. The inhospitable environment is clearly depicted. The struggle of living on this desolate rock comes through pretty well, but goddamn, some of those scenes. The dancing in the house on the planet's surface, that scene was way too long. It was dragged out so much it became awkward. The way one of the miners tells Kirk he's busy and then proceeds to just uncomfortably stand behind one of the women as well. I don't know. None of that worked for me, nor did the music this time around. It felt very dated somehow. And going back to this Mudd fellow, I have a very hard time accepting that this sort of police force of the galaxy would just accept his dealings in people. Yes, the episode took the time to establish that not only are these three women fully aware of the situation, but actually pretty happy with it, but the Enterprise and Kirk are trying to get this guy on charges of illegal operation of a vessel. I don't know. Even in space, even with alien cultures, curious, different cultures being a part of everyday life, I feel like selling or dealing in people would have to have some kind of regulation. Mud would have had to have some sort of permit, maybe. In any case, I think it would have made more sense for this episode to deal in the legality and the morality of this facet, of this aspect of cultural diversity. Instead, the episode concludes by expecting us to believe that the special pills the women were taking to become younger were in fact useless, and self-confidence alone is enough to change one's physical appearance. It's a cute message, that's true, and being someone with very little self-confidence, the message does resonate with me. But the awkward execution, the heavily paced delivery aren't enough to get the message to have any kind of impact. Not to mention, this is well into the realm of fantasy and magic, not at all science fiction. Before we conclude, I did want to take just a minute to address the three women in the episode. As we said earlier, they are for the most part very happy with the whole situation. They want these arranged marriages. Not that arranged marriages are an issue here, not at all. A point is also made to show how intelligent and aware these characters are. When they do things, they do them by choice. So they're not being abused or coerced in any way. And they're not just plot devices. They are actual characters. I do, however, feel that the episode could have done a better job at portraying them and showing them to the audience. Because even if I do get it, all three are supposed to be hyper attractive and having this strange, strong effect on some of the crew. Filming their asses in order to get that across, it was clumsy, to say the least. Honestly, I feel like the directing did more harm in regards to female representation than the story did itself. And that brings us to the end of the review. Mud's Woman is mediocre. The story wasn't good and didn't necessarily justify the episode's runtime. The whole thing feels dragged out. Mud isn't really a character I want to see again, and rather than open my mind to new possibilities about the future and the vastness of space, I was simply puzzled by the very enigmatic and metaphorical ending. I know, I'm sorry, but hey, look, not every episode can be gold, and thus not every review can be positive. Alright, let's now move on to the Easter eggs and references part of the video. There you go. It's now time to compare the original version with the remastered version. Alright, I'm kidding. Well, kind of. There were no Easter eggs. I'm sorry. Nothing juicy to point out, nothing that calls back to previous episodes. The best I can do is point out that Uhura isn't wearing red, and Dr. McCoy places Spock's heart here, which suggests the internal organs of Vulcans aren't the same as humans, or at least they aren't arranged in the same way. But those two things are more stray observations than anything else, so yeah, no Easter eggs. Alright, let's start comparing versions because yes, there are a few interesting things to talk about here. For starters, the biggest, most noticeable change is Mud's ship. In every shot of the original version, it was very hard to make out what we were actually being shown, and when the asteroids came flying by, everything was admittedly a bit janky, a bit awkward. It didn't look too good. The remastered version offers us updated visual effects when it comes to the asteroids, but also an entirely new model for Mud's vessel. I know it's a big change, but I am fully on board with this. I think in this particular instance, the remastered version does a lot for the sequence, even if the final explosion still looks absolutely fake. Quick note about big changes like this, and I'm sorry to bore you with canon, but as it stands, no one over at CBS has ever stepped up and in an official capacity declared either the original or the remastered version as canon. And though it may seem ridiculous, there are moments where it isn't, and where an official ruling of sorts would be helpful, because in the official story of Star Trek, Harry Mudd was either in this ship or that ship. He wasn't in both simultaneously. Personally, I have a tendency of considering that the remastered version of the original series is canon, even if I do disagree with some creative choices. I think it just makes sense that the correct version is the most recent one, but you know, that's just me. As I said, for now, as it stands, both do count. Moving on, we get the ship replacements boasting more dynamic camera angles. We also get an updated planet, and the very generic wind-blowing shots on the planet's surface have been replaced with a top-down view of the settlement, which include a computer-generated recreation of the actual cabin. I do like the top-down shots. I maybe would have kept some of the windy, dusty moments, but I do enjoy having the all-encompassing angles. It helps give us a better understanding of where the events are taking place. The final thing we need to talk about are these two very short scenes where the actual filmed footage has been cut in order to have longer visual effects shots of the ship. The first one removes about a second of this guy using his console. The second completely edits out Harry Mudd walking out the door after Kirk. Both moments aren't story changing, and man at console didn't do anything more with the extra second he was given, but the actual shot of Mudd holding the door and leaving is gone, and I wonder what you guys think about that. Are you comfortable with the removal of certain, scenes or actions, no matter how small or how insignificant they are? I'm not. But I won't make a big deal out of a Harry Mudd not walking out the door, I guess. Anyway, there you go. That's the review. Those are the Easter eggs. and that is the comparison between the original version and the remastered version. As I said earlier, I'm sorry this wasn't the most positive of reviews, but some episodes just aren't as good as others. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being a part of this little journey back in time I've embarked on. Remember to subscribe, comment, share with your friends. You can support this channel on Patreon by becoming a patron, a monthly patron. And most of all, live long and prosper.